Dumelang ra amogela mo go Daily Thetha on SABC 1. Nna ka lebitso ke nna Nicolette wa Gamashile ngwana wa kwa Bush Patrice Mapulaneng. Ya na re tshwareleng lona le me la matsogo ke seswa rune Andiso wa ga ke bashe. Ka kgwedi ya boraro ya mo South Africa leng kgwedi ya ditokelo, we saw many of us not being able to enjoy our basic human rights in South Africa due to the lockdown regulations in which we have to live under, because at the end of the day they are very necessary. Re kena ga yona kgwedi ya April, which is kgwedi ya yona freedom, and again we're not enjoying the freedom. Most of us are having to move around in South Africa. Ka yona permit, we're seeing soldiers in the streets who are actually up and down patrolling South Africa. Ka kgwedi ya May, which is Workers' Month, some of our workers in South Africa are not going to enjoy the liberty of having a job because retrenchments are going to happen. Most people are going to lose their jobs. Now we are being tested. Our freedom and the way we know it is being tested right now in South Africa, and it's going to be tested for futures to come. What is actually happening? How do you as a South African right now enjoy your freedom?
Ngithi nami ngibingeleleke nami emakhaya igama letwa miya ucwanini usibe uzizilo sithi ngempela Nicolette sibheka le ndaba ukuthi kule nyanga lena of course of Freedom Month, Freedom Day, ukuthi amalungelo nenkululeko, what does it mean to umbukeli ohlele ekhaya, what does it mean to umuntu ohlele ekhaya under the season of the lockdown in South Africa during the COVID-19 of course pandemic in the world. Kodwa nakhona ukuthi what does it mean to someone who knows that they have a right to education, what does it mean to someone who knows that they have a right to freedom of movement, but in this time those are not applicable because of course of the limitations that have been posed by the government to preserve our health that we have the right to as abantu abasha and as umzansi. Sithi ke sicela wena namhlanje sibuza ukuthi wena ukuthi ngempela, do you believe that the freedom that we have in this time is something that we understand and we are able to express, or do you feel in this time and season that we are not enjoying our freedom after 25 years?
I'm even afraid to ask you, what is the state of freedom in South Africa right now, because it's quite a different conversation in comparison to last year. But last year, SABC2's Once Upon a Story, which is a documentary, ile yabua with some of our leaders to ask them, what is the state of South Africa's freedom last year? Listen to what they had to say.
The 27th of April 1994 was a very significant day where many black people in South Africa were voting for the first time. So it has a significant historical connotation.
The fact that I can sit here today and tell you that the South African government, the ANC government, does not know how to build factories is a huge achievement. If you said that under apartheid, after this interview, police would be going to my house to arrest me.
But 1994 was also a time where we could dream of what South Africa could become. So it's a very, very significant day in that symbolic manner.
I suppose it symbolizes the move away from apartheid and the creation of this society, this non-racial society, this rainbow nation, as it were.
Snaking queues from cities and sprawling townships to far-flung villages. An air of excitement and expectancy.
What we have been taught to understand Freedom Day is basically the idea that, in a particular time and moment in South Africa, our colonizers decided to be nice to us. They decided to recognize our humanity and said that we were free. Of course, there was nothing, in terms of concrete evidence which proved this freedom except for, the flag, the new flag that the country got, and of course the new national anthem.
I can't say that as young people that we are free, if indeed the structural challenges and handicaps continue to come up at every corner.
There is no point in saying people have got freedom, people have got the right to choose, people have got the right to live where they want, whereas we know that they don't have the means through which they can effectively exercise that choice.
If you are living in poverty, if you are living in a shack settlement or in many parts of the townships which apartheid built, you don't have that freedom. You do have the freedom to vote, and poor people vote in very large numbers in this country. but you won't listen to.
It's an incredible day for all of our people. And I mean all of our people, black and white, because as from now, we won't be able to say that illegal regime. It'll be our government, and we will be committed to working for this new South Africa that has begun today.
Democracy for me is a system of governance where you rely on the opinion of the majority of people within a society to give legitimacy to your decisions. It's a messy, fractious, difficult, and imperfect system of government, but it's focused.
And you look at it for 25 years, we look back and reflect ukuthi thina njengesizwe South Africa sibuyaphi, how much struggle and how much victory we've been able to achieve in the years of freedom, seeing our players from Wazamdlalo going and playing alongside other internationals to bring it home politically, where we have a voice, our voting has a choice in us to say, who do you want, what do you want to do? And that really resembles how far and kind of gives me the hope of saying, noma sina 25 years esingenile kuningi esesikwenzile.
Anginayo mina that I don't feel that. And to be quite honest, what I'm seeing, especially right now with COVID-19, it's starting to unearth those things that we thought we had freedom on, but we really don't, guys. Unequal education, you know, the lines between rich and poor in this country, it's just shocking. We've got a social media coming in from Tabang saying, we only have political freedom. There is nothing much to celebrate. Those who should celebrate are politicians with their families, as they're the only ones that are enjoying both political and economical freedom. Ordinary people like me are just living and waiting for that day when we leave this earth. We just can't celebrate it while we have no food and we can't afford to buy bread. Just imagine a loaf of bread is 12 Rand 99. I mean, Tabang, and I echo Tabang's sentiments, you know. And I think sometimes South Africa, because if you look at right now, a lot of what's happening because of these COVID-19, who have likened this lockdown to what used to happen in apartheid times, right? But the reality is it's not apartheid times. We're doing this for the benefit of all South Africans. But what it has come to realize, Melody, is the fact that South Africa is an unequal society.
Yabona ngiyajabula ukuthi nokuletha ubeka yena ukuthi ucabanga kanjani. Ake sithathe voice note siza ukuthi wena njengombukeli uthini.
Freedom Day and the lockdown, guys. The way I feel so disappointed, because as a country we used to celebrate this day, but now it won't happen due to this disease called coronavirus, but only God knows why. Lockdown into city to be safe, to be responsible about my life, my studies. Yes.
Uyazi ubhuti na uyayichaza kancane indaba yakho ukuthi yena uzizwa kanjani, and I mean you can hear a bit of discouragement in his voice, because it makes me really question ukuthi what do we quantify, what defines our freedom esikhathini samanje. Ngempela besikhuluma ngokuthini sinenkululeko sikhuluma ngani, and that's why today's show is very important for wena mbukeli ohlele ekhaya. Kodwa ithi ngithatha umlayezo ophuma kugandaganda kwakamchunu uthi ke yena, I'm not free, we are not free, leaders are controlling us using the lockdown, soldiers and the police. They say stay home for how long? Because the virus doesn't stop. I don't have a say, my voice is important to them when it's time to vote. Lockdown is a waste of time and money. We are broke now, hunger is killing people, they got no money, no work, no pay. What am I supposed to do? And I mean, he's raising things that were there that were there even before
the lockdown.
Coronavirus, things that were there in terms of unemployment of the youth.
But right now, it's highlighting them. And I think that for me is important because if we live freedom during freedom, people who are free and an equal society, right? Right now, we're fighting economic freedom. Do we have it in South Africa? And that's what we're going to be talking about. Episode what does freedom mean to you, and really how do you enjoy it during this lockdown? Do stay with us. Welcome back to Daily Thetha. And I think in the context of our conversation, Melody, what was the state of our human rights and freedom in South Africa before COVID-19? Now, if you know, the South African Constitution, it's one of the most globally recognized, acclaimed constitutions because it really protects our human rights. And you will see that in the Bill of Rights, we've got the right to mostly basic things and also to protecting our human dignity. But what we have also realized is that our government is still failing at delivering some of our socio-economic rights. This is delivering water, delivering sanitation, delivering equal education. So if we're still struggling with those things and our constitution is saying another thing, how do we get to a point where we match up those two things so that every single person in this country really does enjoy those rights that are protected by the constitution? Now, I just want us to quickly go and look at a video clip of the then young Vice President of South Africa Students Organization, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, and what she had to say about the importance of enjoying your freedom.
The doors of learning and culture shall be opened. The government shall discover, develop, and encourage national talent for the enhancement of our cultural life. There shall be houses, security, and comfort. All people shall have the right to live where they choose, to be decently housed, and to bring up their families in comfort and security. There shall be peace and friendship. South Africa shall be a fully independent state which respects the rights and sovereignty of nations. Let all who love their people and their country say now, as we say here, these freedoms we shall fight for side by side throughout our lives until we have won our liberty. The Freedom Charter is a very significant document in our struggle, in that it was not imposed on the people by a few office bearers of any organization, but it was a document which was drawn by the people themselves, and it embodies the aspirations of the people themselves. The principles which we fought for in 1976 and which we're still fighting for now, if we look back the history of our struggle and see where they originated, we can see clearly that they originated also in the Freedom Charter, because the Freedom Charter rejects the Bantustans, though at the time they were not actually in practice. It talks about freedom of education, housing, freedom to work, to stay where you like, and all these ideas were originated in the Freedom Charter, but are now being carried on by people who may consciously or not consciously be aware that they are taking those ideas from the Freedom Charter.
Joban Bonage, of course, Umama Nkosazana Dlamini, also just explaining how she has, as a young girl at the time, experienced and desired freedom. But today we also see her serving in ministry at this time. And over the years, we've seen that we've adopted the challenges over the years, but also more likely we're starting to understand the possibilities. Amalungelo, Abantu, and freedom in this time of lockdown, what does it mean? We're joined by Dio Mavinga, who's the Southern Africa Director with Africa Division at Human Rights Watch Lago Daily Thetha. Sir, welcome to Daily Thetha.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
I think the first question I'd like to ask Diwa is that when we look at freedom and we look at human rights in this time, are we able to differentiate? Are we able to understand what is infringed and not infringed?
Yes, what is important is to know that freedom and human rights are meant to enable the people, everyone, to live better lives. So it is about human dignity, it's about improving our lives. So the essence of freedom is that life should be better for all. And now in the time that we are in of COVID-19, there are some limitations which are provided for in the Constitution in the interest of public health, of the greater good. So everyone collectively has to realize that the main objective is that because of this pandemic, because of this threat to public health, there are measures that must be put in place to control and limit the spread of the virus, which might necessarily mean limitations on some rights, but ultimately there is a common purpose that is achieved, which is basically to preserve life and to ensure that as we emerge from this much stronger and with a better and fuller enjoyment of our rights.
COVID-19 is a unique situation that globally we're all being faced with. Let's talk a little bit of outside COVID-19, pre-COVID-19, the state of freedom in South Africa. You talk about all of us enjoying that freedom. Are all South Africans enjoying freedom at the same level?
Well, the good we acknowledge is that South Africa has a solid, robust constitution that is admired worldwide, and strong institutions like the judiciary, the media, the Public Protector's Office, the Human Rights Commission in South Africa. But clearly, not all South Africans have been enjoying their rights equally, particularly when you look at people's circumstances, socio-economic rights, people in the informal settlements, in the townships, with no access to housing, no access to clean, sufficient water, no access to basic health care. So that is clear that there have been serious shortcomings, over 17 million South Africans on social grants, but again, not enough to ensure lives of dignity. But what is important is to say there is a basis in law in terms of the Constitution, and the gap is on ensuring that everyone realizes and enjoys those rights that are articulated in the Constitution and in the laws. We must acknowledge, of course, that it is not a one-day event. It cannot happen overnight.
But the
authorities.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm so sorry to come in there and interrupt you. What is then the point of celebrating this globally acclaimed constitution that is supposed to, give South Africans those human rights and the freedoms, freedom of expression, freedom of, the dignified life, if not all South Africans are enjoying it? And you're saying it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's been how many years? It's over 25 years of South Africans having this constitution. And what my question essentially is are we actually expressing those needs and the desires that were put in the Freedom Charter?
More can be done, certainly. This is an ongoing, a continuous struggle. But of course, I want to agree with you that it is not enough if nothing is happening for 25 years. When you talk of socio-economic rights in the Constitution of South Africa, there is the idea that these rights must be achieved progressively, and that the authorities, the government must put resources, financial resources, human resources, planning towards the achievement of these rights. So there must be a clear plan that we must be able to see. For example, let's talk about housing. We must have a clear progression from 1994 to say up to now, how many units have been made available. So there must be progress, access to education for the people of South Africa. There must be marked progress over the years. And it is problematic if the country becomes stagnant, there is no movement, people do not have electricity, do not have water. We need to be pushing, and this is where I'm saying the government do more. In fact, this crisis that we have now, COVID-19, offers an opportunity because there is now a more urgent need for access to food and clean water. So when you look at these provisions now, they cannot stop outside of this crisis. They must be able to continue so that people continue to have access to clean water.
But I mean, I absolutely agree with you when in terms of and access to basic means. But we're looking at a basic need of movement. We see collective rights infringing on individual rights or individual rights infringing on collective rights. And you see people are complaining, but how is this not being balanced? Do you think the government understands the way some rules are conflicting when it comes to the freedom of movement, as an example?
Well, I think what's important when you talk of freedom of movement, I've clearly said that there are some circumstances, for example, a public health crisis, where there could be legitimate limitations on the freedom of movement. But I think what we need to highlight is how those regulations are implemented. We have seen how some members of the security forces have become overzealous and they've gone over the line in terms of a heavy-handed implementation of the laws. There is need to put front and center the dignity of the people. So you do not abuse, you do not beat up people. You explain to the communities why it is important to comply with certain regulations for a specific and limited period of time in order to achieve a greater good. So that people understand where they are and where you're coming from. And then by so doing, you are able to achieve the purpose of the limitations on movement, including social distancing, avoiding overcrowding, and ensuring that people stay indoors.
I want to take this opportunity to say on behalf of Daily Thetha, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.
And even so, thank you on highlighting the key elements that we need to be speaking about. Before COVID-19 ifika, we had freedom of friends to visit at any time. We had freedom of drinking whenever we wanted to. We had freedom of education. But manje sibambezekile, and we want to look at, after the break, how has this pandemic affected us and our freedom? After the break. Welcome back to Daily Thetha Guru SABC 1 Sachabulugutu. Sasekona uhleli nathi, wherever you are in the country, we appreciate you. At this point, Sakulma, of course, about COVID-19, but rather into the Freedom Day limitations and, of course, the human rights infringement in conversation. At this point of Inkulumo yethu lamhlanje ukuthi every person knows that we are given the right and freedom of movement. We have access because of our constitution. But in that we have a responsibility to be able to then partake in the constitutional element that government has been given to say, come a disaster crisis like this, the government has the responsibility and has the right to be able to impose limitations. And in those limitations being imposed, we then saw some people feeling, which as in, I'm not too sure I'm being infringed or not. But also, I love how it was very much echoed by, of course, the UN Secretary General, which is Antonio Guterres, who went on to amplify to all nations across the world that during this time of COVID-19, please, may we not infringe on the human rights of people across the world and, of course, their freedom. And, of course, when you're going to have a look at that is right about now.
COVID-19 pandemic is a public health emergency, but it is far more. It is an economic crisis, a social crisis, and a human crisis that is fast becoming a human rights crisis. In February, I launched a call to action to put human dignity and the promise of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights at the core of our work. As I said then, human rights cannot be an afterthought in times of crisis, and we now face the biggest international crisis in generations. Today, I am releasing a report highlighting how human rights can and must guide COVID-19 response and recovery. The message is clear. People and their rights must be front and center. A human rights lens puts everyone in the picture and ensures that no one is left behind. Human rights responses can help beat the pandemic, putting a focus on the imperative of health care for everyone. But they also serve as an essential warning system, highlighting who is suffering most, why, and what can be done about it. We have seen how the virus does not discriminate, but its impacts do. exposing deep weaknesses in the delivery of public services and structural inequalities that impede access to them. We must make sure they are properly addressed in the response. We see the disproportionate effects on certain communities, the rise of hate speech, the targeting of vulnerable groups, and the risk of heavy-handed security responses undermining the health response. Against the background of rising ethno-nationalism, populism, authoritarianism, and the pushback against human rights in some countries, the crisis can provide a pretext to adopt repressive measures for purposes unrelated to the pandemic. This is unacceptable. More than ever, governments must be transparent, responsive, and accountable.
And I could not agree more. In actual fact, just as Mogoeng on a conversation on radio said that we need to have an empathetic approach when it comes to these times, because all of us are uncertain of what COVID-19 has really brought globally. So to have soldiers going out there and being brutal, for me is really disingenuous and really discouraging, because everyone is in this together. But we have a conversation with the head of advocacy and organizing at the Social Justice Coalition. Her name is Musa Gwebani, and we talk a little bit about the freedom during COVID-19. Mem Musa, welcome to Daily Thetha.
Hi, how are you?
Fantastic, thanks. And how are you, ma'am?
I'm well, thank you.
I think Sis Musa COVID-19 Disaster Management Act, is it compliant with the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Freedom Charter?
Yes, yes it is. And perhaps the bigger question would be, have the regulations that have been promulgated under the Disaster Management Act been compliant with the Constitution?
Yes.
And perhaps there's some manner, there might be a way to think around those regulations. But most importantly, perhaps the promulgation could have been constitutional, but has the implementation been? Or have the people that are meant to be enforcing these regulations been doing it in the most constitutional way possible? And I think from the footage that we've seen and from the experiences of some people on the ground, that might not always be the case.
And do you feel, do you feel that when you talk about regulation being implemented, the use of the word lockdown and versus how it's been said to we have with the culture of militancy, are we able to separate? Because Abantu Abaningi felt like it was very forceful and it was a scary usage. Do you find that it was correct?
So, not correct. And so there have been extremities. I mean, to say something is extreme is kind of like even a euphemism to me, because someone was actually killed by an army official. They were murdered by an army official who believed, I suppose, that he was carrying out his duties as being mandated by the current situation. And it's clear that he has exceeded the scope of his power and exceeded the scope of basically what he was told to do. And so there has been a culture, and there's a culture of violence in South Africa. There's a culture of state officials, particularly people who are meant to be enforcing the law, breaking the law with impunity.
But I mean, doesn't it also then bring in the opportunity for us to consider how we are known to have a sense of resistance? You know, we've seen a lot of times how these things at riots, where things easily become a sense of very dangerous for the community. Do you feel that they should have just used a lighter term? Because I really struggle to understand it, because considering our situation in South Africa, especially with violence.
So it would be impossible, for example, for the police to be able to do all of that work by themselves because of just the number of police people that exist in South Africa and the kind and the nature of the lockdown itself and the kinds of policing and keeping and watching people's behavior that needs to be regulated during this time. We would have inevitably needed reinforcement from army officials, because the task would have been far too difficult for the police to be able to handle on their own. However, I think the army officials, together with the commanders of the army, had to have made it very clear how they ought to treat ordinary people on the street. And this is not a combat. This is not even a peacekeeping mission. This is to make sure that people's lives are saved. And these people pose no danger to you. And many of the times, these people are completely unarmed. And so the measure and the kind of violence or the kind of resistance one ought to employ to an ordinary person who hardly only just probably has their hands to defend themselves is much lower than one would need to in a real conflict situation. And South Africa isn't in conflict.
Sis Musa.
A health crisis.
Sis Musa, just coming in there and listening to you, government, in my basic understanding, right now government can take away my freedom and my rights because of a national disaster. Now, I understand that under a state of emergency, where the government has the right to suspend some of the Tukelo Tsaka and my freedom. What is the difference in what government can do or cannot do during a national disaster and a state of emergency?
And so, the two acts, so the state of emergency, which is alluded to in the Constitution, which also has its own separate act together with the disaster act. So a state of emergency can only be employed by the state if there is civil unrest, and it can only be employed by the state when the intention is to restore peace. And so one would only employ a state of emergency if there was a threat to the peace of the country, meaning that there was active conflict or so for example, things like a pseudo warfare type situation is when you would employ a state of emergency. And the rights there would be far more drastic, that would be removed, would be far more drastic than what we're experiencing now. A state of disaster is merely to ensure that we restore the country to its ordinary functioning, basically. And so there's no real threat of violence around a state of disaster. It can be really, like if there was an earthquake, for example, we've been in a state of disaster just to try and figure out how we rebuild and return to a state of normalcy. So it's quite different from a state of emergency.
And Sis Musa, the reason why I keep that question is because we've seen the government right now under COVID-19 extend some of those basic human rights to South Africans, things like the right to water and sanitation, things like the right to a dignified space to live for the homeless. We saw them being taken off the streets. Did it need to take COVID-19 for the South African government to extend and prioritize its people's rights and freedoms?
So that's very interesting, and I'd like to maybe hear from the government officials as well as to what has been the delay, if these things could be effective in such a short space of time. And we really do welcome. Personally, I welcome some of the interventions that many organizations and many communities have been fighting for a very long time to suddenly be realized. Suddenly understand that one can put water tanks into informal settlements and people can have access to clean drinking water. I'm also those just quite wary about perhaps government is funding these things from extraordinary measures. So it wasn't money that we readily had enough of prior to this, and that this is a reallocation of some sort. And perhaps we might feel the results of this reallocation at a later point.
Sis Musa, sibonga kakhulu ukuthi wazuhlale nathi la ku-Daily Thetha. Thank you for your input to our conversation namhlanje behleli nayo. And sithi besibuya after the ad break, we actually get to look into, will the government even consider amendments post-COVID-19 when it comes to the Constitution? But
and I think Melody, sorry guys, just before Melody goes to the ad break, it's important for us to apologize for the sound that was, the sound issues that we were experiencing in that call.
With that being said, asiyenje itolo besibuya. Welcome back to Daily Thetha on SABC1. Do remember the hashtag is Daily Thetha, Yonke Daw, Instagram, Twitter, WhatsApp. La was khona ukuthi sikhona ungakhohlwa faki hashtag. In this pointed conversation, Joba Kuluma, looking at how we've developed. I mean, we've seen things that the government had to upgrade. We've seen how healthcare, we've seen how housing has been considered, how abantu behlala emgaqweni manje sebanethuba ukuthi babe nendawo yokulala, and that is such a beautiful success story as we see in the trying times of COVID-19. but also it leaves us with a lot to ask ukuthi ngempela kuzoshintsha now once this pandemic crosses over, once we're able to find a vaccine, and it makes us also ukuthi will our government consider keeping things the way they are? That's why we get to speak to political commentator, which is of course Mighty Jamie after this. But for now, I want to take you a bit to watch a video that showcases how different countries are dealing with the infringement of human rights. And of course, we get to see how the, Human Rights Watch, which is an NGO, showcases. Let's have a look.
Workers in low-wage and precarious jobs, particularly women, are among the most vulnerable to the economic fallout of COVID-19, and economic rescue plans should make them a priority. In the US, despite large relief packages, millions of low-wage workers will remain without social protection.
Some people's disabilities may place them at higher risk of serious illness or death from COVID-19. For those who are locked away in institutions, the risks are even higher. Governments can protect the rights of people with disabilities by consulting with us, people with disabilities, regularly to make sure policies do not discriminate and meet our needs.
Infectious diseases can spread quickly in places of detention like prisons. Authorities should consider reducing prison populations by supervised or early release of some prisoners. Some countries have begun to do this. Authorities should also ensure prisoners are screened for COVID-19 and have access to healthcare.
En République démocratique du Congo, nous avons eu près de 2 ans de riposte plutôt chaotique à une épidémie mortelle d'Ebola. La méfiance et la suspicion étaient si fortes au sein des communautés que des violences ont éclaté contre des personnes déployées pour aider les professionnels de la santé. Les autorités devraient communiquer de manière efficace et impliquer les communautés dans leur stratégie pour contenir le COVID-19.
The U.S. government response to the COVID-19 crisis reveals severe problems in the immigration system. Under the Remain in Mexico program, asylum seekers are in Mexican border towns staying in unhygienic camps where they are at heightened risk of contracting COVID-19. Government officials can ill afford to continue down this destructive path.
Governments have an obligation to protect health workers who are working tirelessly in the front lines. In Venezuela, where the health system collapsed before COVID-19, doctors don't have access to water to wash their hands. Instead of protecting them, authorities are harassing and detaining those who speak up.
Uyabona-ke now ukuthi ilizwe lethu ngempela liyathuthuka kulesikhathi, and you see how other countries are struggling with basic needs that our country has been really able to upgrade, and we applaud of course our governments like South Africa. Kodwa sithi sihlale nawo lo mbuzo ngempela ukuthi will things change, can things change? We welcome onto the show of course our political commentator, which is Mighty Jamie. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course, but we need to just get into the basic understanding. In your opinion, uyacabanga ukuthi izinto zizoshintsha post-COVID-19 in terms of the basic necessities that have been given to our people?
Well, into ebalulekile ukuthi everyone now understands what the government is actually capable of doing in terms of service delivery. So we've seen Jojo tanks being delivered in a short space of time. We've seen temporary housing being built. We've seen grants being increased in a short space of time. So I think that the analysis we sometimes get is that it takes time to do these things. But we've seen now that government can be efficient. It's not just for World Cup that they can be efficient. They can also be efficient under crisis. Now the challenge is going to be, how do we maintain that level of energy in service delivery and observation of rights post-COVID? Because right now, COVID, everyone is watching. Everyone is paying attention to how South Africa responds, because we are still one of the top 5 countries in Africa with this virus. But after this crisis ends, that kind of attack will no longer be there. And South Africa generally performs well. Then we've got a big match temperament. The question is going to be, uma i-crisis lesidlulile sizokhona we maintain le momentum noma sizoyehlisa umoya kancane, and hopefully we don't do that.
Do you think kodwa le ndlela izinto ezime ngakhona in terms of the political state of South Africa and the governance that has really come out and stood forth, this could be a benefit and a positive for the current leading party? Don't you think that will work for them to sustain?
Yeah, I think Uguti, they've definitely benefited from showing this kind of maturity, this kind of measured response, and they definitely will benefit from this kind of attention if they can sustain the level of delivery. Inkinga yokuthi kuyaliwa lapha kuyatshontshwa futhi sometimes municipalities in the crisis, and those habits can come back and slow things down post this level of attention. But I must say that South Africa has responded incredibly better than many of the people in the region. So if we beg Tanzania by piggy COVID, they're even saying it's not there, the president is denying it, and things are as normal there, and lives are being put at risk. eZimbabwe bayahluleka ukutesta abantu, ama-test abo. So South Africa has really been exemplary with the low budget that it has.
Because it just explores how some rights have been, I guess, impacted in other countries, but also in South Africa. It makes me look at how we've been sitting with the inequalities that we see every day. Do you think then the equality is actually delaying our success of enjoying freedom as we should as abantu basemzansi?
Yeah, le ndaba ye-inequality indaba enkulu kabi, and it affected the rate of progress in dealing with this crisis. In fact, even as Singapore, because they had some places where people were living in crowded conditions, they were unable to keep the virus under control. But and everywhere where it was nice, they were managing the virus, but they didn't pay attention to our dormitories now for our construction builders. And the virus puma kula ama dormitory back into umphakathi, and then they had to lock down at a more severe level. The reality is South Africa has not dealt with the informal settlement problem, and we have not dealt with the fact that people were put into townships to live on top of each other.
Jamie, just what I'm actually just trying to understand enough from my side is that it feels a little bit naughty from our government, or all of a sudden they are now able to make all these things available. Unemployment grant is being given. People are now getting social grants, or in addition to their social grants, people are getting access to water. Even Eskom is not load shedding us.
Yes, Nicolette. Ngicela ukubamba kancane ngiyakubona already ukuthi udedele. Ngicela ukuthi siye ku-ad break besibuya sikwazi ukuthi siyibambe le ndaba siqhubeke nayo kodwa after the ad break.
Okay. Back on Daily Thetha. When we started the show, we looked at freedom even before COVID-19 in South Africa. Then we looked at it during COVID-19. What are some of the freedoms and human rights that have now kind of been taken away from us while we are living under the National Disaster Act? Right now, some of the things that our government has been able to do. I mean, we've seen people in South Africa, their life has, been made a little bit better because of what the government has been able to give them and give them access to. Will this be able to carry on post-COVID-19, or is this the only great life that we can live during when there is a disaster in South Africa? We carry on with our conversation with political commentator Mighty Jamie. Mighty Jamie, welcome back to Daily Thetha.
It's good to be back.
And I think one of the questions, and I think I had posed it just before we went on this ad break, this feels a little bit disingenuous, a little bit naughty from our government. All of a sudden, an employment grant. But all of a sudden, there's an increase in social grants. All of a sudden, is this going to be able to carry on post-COVID-19, or is this a kind of a drastic measure that government needed to take?
Well, the question of sustainability is one that's very important.
Yeah.
But I think some of the challenges that have existed, that were dealt with by the government, were always possible. What was lacking was an urgency, and now I think it's harder for some people to steal the money when everyone is paying attention to the money very closely. Because we must remember that, for instance, in municipalities, I think 93% of the municipalities have got wasteful expenditure. So a lot of money has been going through the leaks because of inefficient accounting, inefficient auditing at a municipal level. So now that everything is being coordinated at a state level, we're seeing better effectiveness. But also, I think there was some budget available for this, because what the state normally would have been doing has all been suspended so that we can focus on fighting this particular COVID-19 crisis. But you are right, there are some real worries around borrowing money in order to pay for some of these things, because we will have to pay for that money back, and when we pay for it back, it comes with interest, and we were already dealing with a high debt load in terms of our debt service payments. Kodwa-ke, kungasenani, we must be very honest, ukuthi there's been a lack of urgency. From 1994, some of the things that could have been done have not been done.
Yes.
In 2010, we were still debating bucket toilets. I don't know if you still remember that debate. 1994, they had promised no bucket toilets by 2010. By 2010, they were still there. And even now, bucket toilet. So some of this has just revealed some of the people who were supposed to be delivering were taking their sweet time to deliver.
So
they weren't delivering on time.
And perhaps, Jamie, let's come in. You spoke about corruption at a municipal level, and because now from a state, a state level, things could potentially become better. Are we then looking at a policy change in how things are going to be disbursed in terms of budgets in South Africa, so that things like the bucket system don't become an issue in the near future?
I think we have to look at how money is distributed. In general, in Germany, they use what they call a 4P principle.
Okay.
Four people must look at an invoice and approve it before it's deployed. And those 4 people must not work with each other, so that there's a good accounting system. We don't necessarily need that kind of a system, but kumele sibheke kahle ukuthi imali iphuma kanjani kuma municipality and isebenziswa kanjani ngabantu, because khona ukutshontsha okuthize obekwenzakala, and we need to nip that in the bud, because that's where a lot of the leaks have been happening. But ngaphandle kwalokho, i-delivery yona itself, kusobala ukuthi khona abantu who've been delaying with delivery. They've been taking their time, and we can't continue with that. Now we know turnaround time yama-Jojo tanks. Now we know ukuthi how long does it take ukuthi ugesi ube on. And in fact, indaba le Eskom is an interesting one, because it has been raining, but the power has been on. Ikhola aysekho wet manje. Aysekho wet le khona.
Yabona Putshembu ukhiphe ezinye izinto manje, uqala ezinye izinto bosobuza into enjalo, because nakhona you make me think ngizibuza ukuthi siyazi ukuthi abantu bethu izinto babengazithanda indlela ezihamba ngayo bayalwa, sayatoya, hey, they burn schools and do what. Are you not afraid ukuthi there's a possibility ukuthi mhlambe bebabuyisela the financials that have allocated to social grants back to their standard, sizolahlekelwa ithuba ukuthi sikwazi ukuthi sibone that people want and get what they need, because now people will be angry.
Yeah, that's a real worry. Definitely.
So are we saying government is going to take away all these beautiful things post-COVID-19? Because then we really have a reason to toy.
Yo, they mustn't take away some of these grant allocations. Once a certain lifestyle, these grant increases, there's no reverse. We'll have to move forward with them. And they were necessary anyway, because people have been living under conditions of hunger and starvation for too long.
But
these grants we've been allocating have not been enough.
But mina angazi ukuthi if all were necessary, because abantu abaningi were complaining bakhala ukuthi le 350 le enikwa certain people, for example as a grant for umuntu ongasebenzi, will increase the lack of, or rather will increase the laziness in certain people in the country, which I'm not sure if you find that to be politically correct.
Well, obviously it's not politically correct, but also on the other side, post COVID-19, ukuthi laba bantu esibanika i-unemployment grant, are they actively seeking those jobs or bahleli nje? Because khona abanye abantu abazothatha advantage. Kodwa kumele sinikeze wonke umuntu ithuba ukuthi abe nemali yokuya kuma interview, abe nemali yokulogga onto the internet, send ama CV, applyele lo msebenzi. We mustn't look at every black person as a criminal by default. We must give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And if they show us that they are abusing the system, then we must withdraw privileges. But we can't just treat every black person as if towards in
Mighty Jamie, we definitely hear that sentiment. We cannot treat every single black person as if they are a criminal. Thank you very much for joining us on Daily Thetha, Papa. We really appreciate your contribution.
Sithi-ke sesivala la ekhaya sithi ukhumbule-ke ukuthi the possibilities are there to change our country and also to be able to enjoy our freedoms. Kodwa nathi we must play a role in ensuring that we allow that the system to take place and for the government to lead us in these times.
But the lockdown regulations are not there to suppress your freedoms and your human rights. They are there to make sure that we can contain this as quickly as possible. Thank you for tuning into Daily Thetha. We'll see you on the social media, carrying on with our conversation.